Hi everybody, so for part 2 of my monthly wrap-up for April and May and maybe possibly part of March, I wanted to do my Taylor Swift coded TBR. So a lot of the books in Rachel Catherine's video have been reviewed in other videos that I have done from earlier in the year. And then for these lyrics and lines, most of their books that they recommended were books I had not read yet. So this was a really good mix for me to get reintroduced to books I had not read and books that I loved from the end of last year. So I wanted to start with the DNFs because actually for this Swiftie coded TBR, there are like several books that I just could not get into. Some of them are mentioned in my mid-year freak out tag video, so I might just skip over those so I'm not too repetitive. So the first prompt was Betty, which is from These Lyrics and Lines video. And the book I read for this prompt was Alex Approximately by Jen Bennett. And I did not like this book because there was too much miscommunication. And I just didn't think it was realistic that they were basing their relationship off meeting over the internet and not really knowing each other. And that's why there was so much miscommunication. And the other thing I didn't really like is how the main female character, the male main character, Parker, has a foot fetish. And that made me think too much of the butler from the movie Mr. Deeds. I'm not really sure if you guys remember that movie with Adam Sandler, but it's about Adam Sandler's main character who's like works for a greeting card company, and he comes upon all this wealth, and the butler that works in the mansion has a foot fetish, and I just thought that was gross. So for the prompt mean, Carrie Soto is back. I mentioned in my other video that I didn't like this book because I just couldn't connect to the plot of it being based around tennis because I think tennis is a boring sport. The next one is The Prophecy. The book I picked for this prompt was The Awakening by Nora Roberts. The writing in this book was good. I love the build-up about how the main character finds out she comes across a lot of wealth after her father dies and moves to Ireland, and I love the Irish setting. Once it got into the fantasy plot, though, it really lost me, and I got bored. So that's why I stopped reading it. I talked at length about the cheat sheet in my other video with the midlife freakout tag, so I'm not going to talk about that again. So you will have to watch my first video to hear my thoughts on that book. The next book, Last Kiss, If He Had Been With Me by Laura Nowlin. This book could also technically be in the prompt, You Need to Calm Down, an overhyped book. Destiny and Sarah and Haley and Rachel talked about this a lot in their videos. And I didn't like the writing. I thought it was too childish. The main character was really pretentious and annoying, and I wanted to punch her in the face. And also, it's spoiled in the very first chapter of the book that Finney dies. So that leaves nothing to the imagination. So I stopped reading this book at like 125 pages because I just couldn't continue. And for Speak Now, I already talked about ACOTAR in my other video too, how much I love the first book, how much I thought the second book was a total disappointment, and watch that video for my thoughts on that book. Then the other DNF I wanted to talk about that isn't related to a Taylor Swift prompt, but I think the main character in the book is actually a foil for Taylor Swift, and the authors, Emily Wimberly and Austin Simon Broca, who also wrote The Roughest Draft, which I loved, did not do a really good job of representing Taylor Swift if this character was supposed to be a representation of her. And I am talking about The Roughest Draft. I talked about this in another video, I think, about how I just think these authors did a terrible job of representing Taylor Swift, how much I didn't really like the character. I thought she was too whiny, and I didn't really like, and this is something I don't like about Taylor Swift's songs either. So obviously we can tell that this main character, Riley, is supposed to be a foil of Taylor Swift, because she writes songs about her breakups with her exes and how angry she is at them for how their relationship failed. And, like, I love all of Taylor Swift's music, but the songs that you can tell that are about her exes, I can kind of read through the lines a bit and tell who she's talking about. She's dated Joe Jonas, she's dated John Mayer, I can't remember who else she's dated, but, yeah, I just don't like the songs where she talks about the couples that she's dated, because she just sounds really angry and pretentious, and that's what this character was like. So I don't know if these authors were trying to what they were trying to get across with this character. I didn't like the way they represented Taylor Swift, if this was supposed to be a representation of her, because this character just came across as mean and annoying, and that doesn't seem to be, to me, what Taylor Swift is like in real life. I've never met her, but if I did meet her, I'm sure I would get along really well with her. So let's get back into the books that I did like for these prompts. The first one is Enchanted, and this book I talked about in my other video that I just did with the mini-year free girl tag, Practice Makes Perfect by Sarah Adams. As I just said, I loved the writing of Annie and Will's characters. Will is kind of like the playboy bodyguard, who kind of reminds me of Joey from Friends a little. And Annie is the little sister of Noah, who is the main male character in When in Rome. And I really like the chemistry between Will and Annie, and how he kind of tries to help Annie become more confident in dating. I think that whole plot line between them is very sweet. So I gave Practice Makes Perfect 4 stars. So the next prompt is Better Than Revenge. And I really agree with Rachel's placement for this song. For Tiny Pretty Things. I read Tiny Pretty Things in March, and this book is set at a prestigious ballet school in New York City. And please tell me if you agree with me. If you have read this book too, please tell me if you agree with me that the character who is treating the lead character, Giselle, and being really mean to her so badly should have been kicked out of school for bullying her, because she didn't get any ramifications for how she acted, and she should have been expelled. That's my opinion. The next book is Where Emma Falls. Oh, the next book is Ours, and this book is The Happy Ever After Playlist by Abby Jimenez, which is the second book in the series with Part of Your World, which I haven't read yet. I'm actually going to be reading Part of Your World very, very soon, because it just came off the whole list at the library, and I'm picking it up in a couple days. But yeah, I also agree with Rachel's choice to put this song with this book with this song prompt, because I just loved the relationship of Sloane, and I can't remember the musician's name in this book. His name might have been Justin. I haven't read this book in a long time, so I can't remember the name off the top of my head. But yeah, I just think the couple in this book really fits this prompt nicely. The next prompt is When Emma Falls in Love, and Rachel did a really good job with picking Malibu Rising for this prompt and focusing on Nina's relationship with her sister Kit. I just think that Taylor Jenkins Reid did a really good job writing a relationship between an older sister and a younger sister, and I can relate, because I'm an older sister and my younger sister and I, while we have our differences in age, we still get along pretty well. And I just love the relationship that Taylor Jenkins Reid built between these two sisters. The next prompt was Unrequited Love. And the book I chose for this prompt was To Catch a Suitor by Sarah Adams, which is the second book in her duology for Regency romance. And I have been on a Regency romance kick ever since starting to read Mimi Matthews' series, The Bells of London, last March. So, in addition to reading this book, I also read for this video, Never Met a Duke Like You by Emily Howard, which I will talk about in just a few seconds. I might as well talk about them both together, actually. So, in both of these books, I really like the relationship build-up between the two characters. To Catch a Suitor really reminds me of Pride and Prejudice, because I think the characters are supposed to be based off of Elizabeth Bennet and Mr. Darcy. And in Never Met a Duke Like You, which I just recently finished, let me pull up the page. So I am trying to remember the name of the male character, and it's bugging me because I cannot remember his name. So in Never Met a Duke Like You, this book is a Regency romance novel, but what I really like about this book is how this author wrote a duchess to have neurodivergency. And as I have mentioned before, I am neurodivergent and I have a disability that is similar to autism, but I am not classified as autistic. I have nonverbal learning disability. So I would like to clarify something because I spoke wrong in a previous video that I made. And I really like the fact that even though this disability was not diagnosed in this time period, I think that Emily Howard did a really good job of writing a character with neurodivergency, and I really appreciate her for it. Oh, here we go. So Vesper is the main character who is the Duchess with neurodivergency, and then the male character, his name is Aspen. I really like the relationship build-up between the both of them and the found family that they have with their group of friends. The next book I wanted to talk about, the next prompt is Just for the Summer. And the book for this category is called, So this was a book I talked about in my video from April where I reviewed anticipated releases. And as I said in my previous video, for those who may not have watched it yet or in a few weeks, I really just liked the relationship between Emma and Justin, and I really thought it was so adorable how Justin made like the pre and post date surveys and kind of checked in with Emma about how he was doing or what kind of things that she wanted to do. I just thought that act of service was really, really sweet. And Abby Jimenez, much like Emily Henry and Lucy Score, do a really good job of writing banter between their romantic leads, and I just love the banter between Emily and Justin, and Emma and Justin. And another thing that is really sweet this about this book is Justin's mom kind of skips out on him and he's left to take care of his younger siblings, and I just think their scenes together are adorable. And if Abby Jimenez decides to write a sequel to this book, what I would like to see happen is A, have Emma and Justin get married, and B, continue the relationship development with Emma and his sisters or his siblings, and see how, like, they get along with Emma and everything. I just think that would be a great idea for a sequel to this book. The next prompt is Clara Bow, which is historical fiction, and several books could fit this prompt. I am doing a whole separate thematic focus on historical fiction, and many of those books could fit this prompt, but the one I'm going to choose to talk about is a book I just finished that is by Lois Lowry, Where the Lilac Grows, or no, what is it called? Let me get it. It's right over here. Like the Willow Tree. I'm sorry. So this book is a historical fiction that my mother-in-law just gifted to me. Thank you, Sally. I just finished this book a couple of days ago. And this book is set during the influenza epidemic in 1918. And I really liked that this is basically a diary of a girl who's living through this whole pandemic. And it really makes me think of how I went through COVID-19 in 2020. So that's what made this book super relatable. I used to read Lois Lowry when I was in middle school. I read 2 of her books, Number of the Stars, which I liked. That was set during World War II. And the other one was called The Giver, which I read in 6th grade and thought it was really boring. That was the first dystopian book I ever read, and I never would have thought that I would have liked the dystopian genre, but ever since I read that book when I was younger, I have really gotten into, like, The Hunger Games and The Maze Runner and books like that. So I never would have anticipated that after reading The Giver when I was 12 years old and not liking it, that I would have liked The Hunger Games. But I just reread The Hunger Games last month and really reignited my passion for it. So the book that I chose for this book is a World War II romance that I just finished a couple of days ago, called Major Peregru's Last Stand by Helen Simonson. And so this book is about a retired war general during World War II who falls in love with a woman who is from India. And I just think their relationship is really sweet. And they obviously have miscommunication sometimes because of the language barrier, but that's understandable because she's from another country. But I really loved this relationship buildup. It was my favorite part of the whole entire book. And I highly recommend it. Please watch my other video that I made about historical fiction books. If you want more historical fiction recommendations, I have it tagged in the description. The next book I wanted to talk about is The Wishing Game by Meg Schaefer, which fits the book Love of My Life. I picked this book not because of a romantic relationship, but because of the relationship between the main character and her student. The main character in this book, her name is Lucy. She's a paraprofessional in the kindergarten, and she wants to adopt her student Christopher, who is in the foster care system, who she doesn't think is being taken very well care of. and their relationship is so sweet. They bond over this book series called the Clock Island series, which is kind of similar to the Magic Tree House. If you are in the same age generation as my sister, you may remember those books. I remember her reading them and talking to me about them all the time, and she really loved them. So that's the kind of vibe I got from the Clock Island series, is similar to Magic Tree House. So the author of the Clock Island series comes out of retirement and starts this whole Hunger Games type thing, competition, where he's trying to like sell his manuscript to the most recent Clock Island book that he wrote before he retired. And I just think that was fun, and the relationship between Lucy and Christopher was very cute. So I gave that book 4 stars, and as I mentioned in my mid-year freakout tag video, my most anticipated release for the second half of the year is Mick Schaefer's new book, The Lost Book. Okay, let's see. The next book is The Tortured Poets Society. This is another book that I just finished recently. It's called The Bookshop on the Corner by Jenny Colgan. Jenny Colgan is an author from Ireland, and most of her books are set in Ireland. And that's the one. This is my first book by her. This book was mentioned. Another book by her was mentioned in a previous video from these lyrics and lines, and I want to read that book next. I can't remember the title. But yeah, I really love the setting. This book is about a librarian who loses her job and then opens like a bookmobile that travels all around the country. And one of the discussion questions about it was if she should have gotten a job at the bookstore in place of somebody else, and she should have. She was really dedicated to her job of recommending books to people, encouraging them to find love, and I really think she should have really gotten a job at the bookstore instead of the other character who got the job, who didn't seem like he was into it. So yeah, I gave that book 4 stars. The next prompt is I Can Fix Him, which is like a romantic comedy type of prompt, I think. And for this book, Jessica from these lyrics and lines picked Beach Read by Emily Henry, which was one of my recent rereads. I just finished it last week. It's one of my favorite Emily Henry books, and as I've mentioned before when I did the anticipated releases video last week and talked about my breakdown of how I rated Emily Henry books, Beach Read is 4 stars, along with Funny Story. Happy Place is 5 stars. And then Book Lovers and People We Meet on Vacation, 3.75. As I have also mentioned in that video, Gus and January are my favorite couple in an Emily Henry book because their build up and banter is great. My mom is reading this, and I don't want to spoil it for her, so I'm not going to really talk about what happens, so I can discuss it with her later on. So Mom, if you're watching this video, we will discuss this book when you finish it. I hope you like it. And so Gus and January are writers, and basically what they do is they spend the summer writing books in each of their genres, like they switch genres. January is a romance writer, and I think Gus writes thrillers or something like that. I can't remember off the top of my head, but yes, and I just love this setting that they're in because it reminds me of the town where my beach house is in Massachusetts, where I go to every year. And the discussion question that I wanted to answer is, what is your favorite scene from the book? And the scene that I picked appears on page 121 when we're at the carousel, because that made me think of the carousel that's on the boardwalk that's near my beach house that I would go riding on every year when I was a little kid. We are almost done. The next book, the second to last prompt in my list is My Lady Jane, which is the first book in a series of 3 books about Janes throughout Hollywood. This first book focuses on Lady Jane Grey. The second book focuses on Jane Eyre. And the third book focuses on Calamity Jane. I really love this book, and I love the build-up in the relationship between Lady Jane and Edward, and I was really rooting for them to get together. I don't want to spoil the ending in case you want to read it too, so you should definitely read this book if you haven't already read it. And the final book in my Swiftie coded TBR that I wanted to talk about today is Where the Dark Stands Still. So this is the second book that I have read this year that is a folktale from another country. The first book I read that was a folktale was from China, and it was called The Cult of the Fox, which I read around Chinese New Year at the end of January, beginning of February. This book, Where the Dark Stands Still, is a Polish folktale that's based on like fairies and a fairy person trying to find his royal lineage. And I really was engaged by this book the whole entire time and could not put it down. I just thought this whole idea of a fairy having royal lineage was really interesting, and I really enjoyed it. So yeah, thank you for tuning into this video about my Swiftie coded TBR wrap-up, and I will be reviewing other books throughout the month of June, and my June wrap-up will be posted on June 25th. I will also be posting another anticipated releases video on June 17th, once I finish reading Not in Love and A Rivalry of Thorns and Happily Never After. So stay tuned for that video. In that video, I will also be reviewing Tom Selleck's memoir. So if you are a fan of Richard Burke from Friends, please turn to that video. I will say that in Tom Selleck's memoir, there is really not too much mentioned in Friends, but I will get into more of that in my review and tell you what I thought of it. So thank you for tuning in. Have a nice day.